Hello, everyone. Welcome to my Atlantic Division series. It's the second in the Atlantic. I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're coming off a third place wildcard spot finish last season with 105 points. They lost in the first round, obviously, to the Boston Bruins in that terrible Game 7. So being a Leafs fan, I know a little bit more about obviously, I know a lot more about the Leafs than I do about the other teams. So this one's going to be a little bit more in depth than the other ones. So they had some huge changes this summer, obviously. Goner, Tyler Bozak, JVR, Roman Polak, Leo Komarov, Matt Martin, and in is John Tavares, obviously, Par Lindholm, Josh Juris, amongst others. So offensively, they have the best 1, 2, 3 punch in the league. Um, Pittsburgh Penguins being second best, in my opinion, just because when I look at most goals above replacement models, even looking at Chance McCollum's goals above replacement model, this is the best 1, 2, 3 punch, and it's not even really that close. I know Dom Listerman put out an athletic article ranking the best 1, 2, 3 punches of all time, and the Leafs were right up there. The only one, I think the last one that was really better in terms of game score per 60 was the 2000 and I think I want to say 2008 Pens with Crosby, Malkin, and Stahl was the third line center for the Pens, and I've talked about how much I love Stahl in the past. So obviously with John Tavares, Austin Matthews, and Nazem Kadri, it's unbelievable depth at the center position. They have three of the top 10 goal scoring centers for the past 2 seasons. And most Stanley Cup winners are built that way. If you look at the Washington Capitals with Backstrom and Kuznetsov and Eller, that's a really strong 1, 2, 3 punch. And Kadri, and then before that, Malkin, Crosby, and Brassard or Bonino. Those are three elite centers and or two elite centers, generational centers, and one really good one. And the Leafs are built around two elite centers and a really really good one in Kadri. So who I think is kind of underrated as well. And the wingers look strongly too. Obviously, Marner and Nylander take up the right side of the ice, and both are elite wingers. Obviously, Marner had a bit of a PDO spike, which is sort of. I think the Leafs fans should temper their expectations. I think it was like on a 90-point pace on the second half of the season. I don't think he's that good. Um, Marner, obviously, he's going to be playing with John Tavares, and I expect him to have a big year, probably 75 to 85 points. However, I think that his run last year was largely PDO driven, and I think a guy like Nylander is really underrated, where he's a much better 5-on-5 player than Marner. He's better at creating shot assists, better primary points per 60. Um, but Marner, I guess he's kind of getting hyped up a lot just because of how good he was in the second half and how good he was against Boston. And I don't blame people, but I just think that those two are a lot closer than people think they are. On the left side, Andreas Janssen steps in, and he's obviously the AHL MVP for the playoffs. Patrick Marleau, who's declining, but he's still pretty good. He's a good finisher. His zone entry exit data suggests that his speed is sort of declining, but he's still a really fast guy. And then Zach Hyman, whom a lot higher on than most people. I think he's pretty good. If you look at his even strength reduction, I believe his even strength primary assist numbers were comparable to guys like Sidney Crosby and Tyler Seguin. So he's a really good even strength scorer. He scored, I believe it was 15 goals last season, almost all at even strength, some sort shorthanded. I'm higher than him and than a lot of people are. Kasperi Kapanen, I think, should slot in on that third line right wing spot ahead of Connor Brown, who I don't really like that much, but I know why people like him. I mean, he's a hardworking worker bee type player, but I believe Kasperi Kapanen has the potential to be a really good middle six forward for the Leafs for a really long time, with probably 20 to 25 goal upside, 20 to 30 assist upside. So the defense, I'm much higher than on the defense than a lot of people are. I think Riley Gardner Dermott is one of, if not the best left sides in hockey in terms of left defenseman. I think Riley, obviously being a 52-point defenseman, and just looking over the stats, defensemen who produced 40 plus points in the 90th percentile of quality of competition or greater is Riley, Hedman, and Doughty. So that just goes to show how good Riley is. Jake Garner, I think, is criminally underrated as well. I think he's a premier left defenseman. People like to point out the mistakes in the horrible Game 7 he had, but I like to evaluate things on a much larger basis than a one-game sample. And he was pretty good in that Boston series outside that one game, but he did have a terrible Game 7. That's what people remember most about Jake Garner. They remember the stupid mistakes, but they don't remember the all the good he does and how much he controls possession, how much he dominates the game in terms of moving the puck up the ice. And I think the Leafs will really miss him if they ended up trading him or letting him walk. I don't know how the financials are going to work, but I think they have to find a way to retain him. And then Travis Dermott, he absolutely obliterated sheltered competition last season. Um, but with an increase in quality of competition, will that really affect his on ice results? Because his possession numbers are absolutely incredible in the limited sample that we saw. However, I think any increase in quality of competition will be offset by an increase in quality of teammates. He's not going to be playing with the total plug and Roman Polak anymore. If you play with a guy like Gardner, or even if you pair him with Riley on the top pairing, if that's not too much for to ask of him, I think his numbers are going to explode. I think he can maintain the level of possession stats, especially with how tight of a gap he plays, how good he is in transition, how good he is skating. So the Leafs are banking on with a guy like Polak coming out and replacing him with a puck mover, which was obviously a problem with in the playoffs with a guy like Bruce Cassidy. He really planned it well, where he was targeting guys like Hainsey, Zaitsev, and Polak over the whole right side. He was trying to dump it in and attack those defenders because they can't really move the puck well, they can't really skate well, and they're an obvious weakness on the right side. So my solution is obviously to move one of the left D to right D. So they're counting on replacing guys like Polak with puck movers, as well as Zaitsev bouncing back. He was terrible last season. He was decent in 2015 or 2016-17. Need him to get back that level, and they need to give Dermott much bigger minutes. Goaltending is pretty good. I think Anderson is going to regress a little bit just because he had an incredible year last season. I think that goaltending is really hard to predict, and I don't think that the backup should be much of a debate either. It has to be Garrick Sparks, in my opinion. You can't let place a guy that was the best goalie in the AHL last season on waivers in 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 protecting a 35-year-old backup in McElhaney. I think the Sparks can give a little challenge to Anderson. They definitely take the workload off of Anderson a lot this year and maybe start him much fewer games and make him face much less work because he was obviously extremely fatigued in the playoffs. So looking at their key stats, their possession stats are around average in terms of Corsi 4, 50.71%, which is 14th. Corsi 4 per 60, 51.81, which is 10th. Corsi against per 60, 50.37, which is 16th. So just looking at their possession stats, they're not that great. And a lot of that has to do with the breakout. I know a guy like Gus Casaros broke down their breakouts on many podcasts, including the Steve Dangle podcast and the Leafs Geeks podcast. And one of the problems is the breakout passes. They attempted the most breakout passes, stretch passes in the NHL last season with the lowest completion percentage. So they need to really, in order to up those possession stats, they need to start entering the zone with a lot more control and try and exit the zone with more quick passing instead of firing up those long bomb stretch passes which don't work. And obviously, there's been a ton of research done on entering the zone with control leads to, I believe it's twice as many shot attempts than dumping it in. So, in terms of goals for per 60, 2.89, goals against per 60, 2.23, which is 15th, and their goals for, I forgot to mention, were first in the NHL. So, in terms of their actual on ice results, they did really well. The defense is better here than it actually shows to be. Which is around league average. So their expected goals for per 60, 2.56, which is third. Expected goals against per 60, 2.45, which is 28th. And if you look at the heat maps that I'm going to put across the screen here, you can see that they really give up a lot of chances from that home plate area where it's a lot of red in front of Freddie Anderson, but they generate the most, or one of the most amount of chances in front of the opposition net in terms of their goals for per 60, where it's a lot of red there. Their PDO 101.79, which is second. So this is actually a sustainable a little bit in my opinion. I don't think it's going to regress too much just because of the elite talent that they have on the roster. They can sustain a higher shooting percentage. I'd expect if the defense doesn't get better, even with the changes that I mentioned, that the save percentage from Freddie Anderson and Curtis McElhaney might regress because you're not going to get a 925 or 935 or whatever Curtis McElhaney had last season from your backup this season. And in terms of penalty differential, is -6, which is 17th, which is extremely strange because of how skilled the Leafs are and how quick they are. That they should be drawing much more penalties than -6. So their most important player, Travis Dermott, he produced 9.39 goals above replacement per 82 in really limited usage. That's Chance McCallum's model I got off of Bill Comeau's Tableau. But in the sample, his comps were in terms of goal above replacement comps were Petrangelo, Jake Gardner, Colton Parayko, and Torrey Krug. Now, obviously, this is heavily influenced by the sheltering that he received. So Um, I think that he should regress a little bit from that goals above replacement model per 82. I think he should be around maybe 6 or 7. However, he's still going to be a really, really important player for the Leafs and really showed well in those games. So as I mentioned, even with the increase in quality of competition, the quality of team increase should really offset that increase in quality of competition. Their least important player, bounce back player, I believe, is Zaitsev. He produced 1.804 goals above replacement per 82 last season. His comparables are Mark Stahl, Braden Coburn, Jordy Ben, and Derek Englund. So he needs to be much, much better. He produced 4.52 the year before. So whether that's due to injuries, I know he had a concussion, and I think he had the cold where he lost a bunch of weight, and then he also broke his ankle, I believe. So he needs to bounce back this season, be a much better contributor on the Leafs on that right side because there's not much there. In conclusion, I have them finishing second in the Atlantic again. They're going to be a challenger for the President's Trophy, a cup contender. But I still see them behind Tampa just because of the experience that Tampa has and the goaltending. I believe is a lot better on Tampa, or not a lot better, but certainly definitely better. And obviously Tampa has Victor Hedman. So in conclusion, thank you for listening to my video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, which is the Boston Bruins preview.